Welcome to a broadcast of the recent Lorain County Commissioners' General Meeting. Unless otherwise announced, meetings are held Wednesday morning at 9:30 at the Administration Building, 226 Middle Avenue, 4th floor, downtown Elyria. These are public meetings and you are invited to attend. Agendas are posted prior to the meeting at www.loraincounty.us. Click on Departments to see the Commissioners page, then click on View Agenda.
Good morning. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. Welcome to the June 1st, 2011 Lorain County Board of Commissioners meeting. Commissioner Kokoski has our dog today.
Commissioner Kalo came up with a good name for her. Is it a her? Yes. I guess PD won't work then. Patrice, how about Patrice? That'll work. She's very cuddly and lovable and friendly, and she would make somebody just a perfect little pet. Look at that. Look at that face. Look at that way so everybody else can see you. Oh, you're so pretty. So come on down to our dog pound. We have plenty of dogs to pick from. How many do we have, Jack? 43 dogs to pick from. So come on down and pick one out and take them home for your family. Look at this little baby. She's so sweet. Oh, I might take her home myself. But she will be available on Saturday at 3 o'clock. And maybe a lottery for this one because she's a treasure. So come on down. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam Clerk?
At 9:45, we'll have an update on the Westshore Commuter Rail under Resolutions Number 1, Job and Family Services Bills.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Investments.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Appropriations.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Transfers.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
No advances, no repayments, requisitions.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
I have one that I'd like to hold. It's number 805-11. On the requisition, it says we are going with the second highest bid on this project as this vendor submitted all necessary paperwork in a reasonable amount of time. The bid that they're going with is $1,175 compared to the lowest bid of $740, so it's almost double. It looks to me that the first proposal, the low proposal, was bid on April 13th, and the other one was faxed on the 14th, so the lower bid looks like it was handed in to us the day before the higher bid. So I was kind of confused as to the whole thing, why they...
Do you have a topic?
It's the CBCF is concrete walkways. Are you aware of it?
Don, are you aware of it?
CBCF?
Oh, CBCF, excuse me, I'm thinking CDBG.
Oh.
Too much alphabet soup going on around here.
Too many alphabet soup.
No, I'm not. Normally, I don't look over their purchases because they have an independent.
Well, I don't normally either, but when there was such a discrepancy in the lowest bid, and the reasoning for picking the other bid was because of a time period, and the time period didn't seem like it was significant, so.
Why don't we just hold that? We'll make
Can we
an
hold that,
inquiry,
please,
and
until we
put
can
it to the next
verify that?
meeting.
Thank you. But I'll second and go ahead with the rest of them.
Yep.
Any
Well
further?
named.
Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Travel.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I'm sorry, on the discussion, I missed a thing. There is a Labor Day festival. We were going to give $2,500
Are
for
we
that.
going back to requisitions?
Yes, I
then?
am, I'm sorry.
You
Oh,
wanna-
requisitions?
you wanna Complete travel first?
Yeah, we can complete travel.
We got a motion on the floor. so.
Yeah. Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Okay. Requisitions for
Yeah,
labor?
going back to that, I'm sorry, I put on the paperwork, that was my one exception. You know, it's 826-11, I believe. For the Labor Day Festival, we're spending $2,500 on that for a one-day event where we spend $1,005 for the entire county fair. There are lower packages on that. I would actually like to go to a lower package for the Labor Day Festival. Same type of booth and everything, it's just less money for the county.
What do you mean by the same type of booth? Don't you get more space for,
No, it's the space is the same, it's just, instead of having your name announced at the festival every half hour, you don't get that. You know, instead of a full page ad, you get a half page ad.
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Cortez, does this money come from general fund, or does it come from solid waste, or where does this money come from?
This funding will be from solid waste as part of their required marketing and outreach, public relations. It's a pretty big line item. We're required to do those kind of things.
Yeah, it's off of our plan, actually.
But that said, it's an allowable activity. What level you do at the Labor Fest is up to the board. I did receive 2 affirmatives and 1 wanting a reduction on this before I submitted it. So that's why we put the requisition in to begin with.
I'm fine with leaving it as is.
Yeah, so am I.
Under bills,
So moved.
Second?
discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Under the Commissioners, authorize various personnel actions as indicated on the summary sheet for employees within jurisdiction of Lorain County Commissioners.
Mr. Cordez?
Thank you, Commissioner Kalo. I do wish to talk to the board in executive session specifically in regards to our ongoing labor dialogue with the United Steelworkers of America with respect to 911 and the process of consolidating various dispatching roles within the county. I do not have any potential new hires at Golden Acres this morning, so mostly we'll be talking about those labor issues and looking at a few proposals.
Is the memorandum of understanding complete between the sheriffs and the commissioners for that combining of 911 and dispatch?
Have you had an opportunity to? I have it. Well, go ahead and say it, Jerry. About it.
Yeah, I forwarded a revised draft, so the revised draft is being reviewed at this point in time.
Do you know when you send over? Friday? Thursday?
Friday.
It was sent over Friday, so
Oh,
I
it's a
probably.
long weekend, that's, everybody's behind a day or two, so.
I'm still looking at last Tuesday's folder. So clearly Counselor has made those changes, and then, well, I do have a meeting that's been set up with staff from the Sheriff's Office, staff from 911, and our office to start talking about the other pieces of the process that need to be identified and decided upon. So I'm comfortable that progress is being made in the right direction, as I've told you before. And once I look at the changes to the MOU, I'll get it out to the sheriff for his review.
Okay.
Approve and waive the reading of the same County Commissioners meeting minutes of May 25th, 2011.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion. Mr. Kayla.
Aye.
Ms. Kowski.
Aye.
Mr. Williams.
Aye.
Approve and enter an agreement with Architect Inc. Cleveland, the amount not to exceed $14,250 for the roof evaluation and inspections of various county facilities. 3 RFPs were received on March 25th, this being the most responsive, complying with specifications to be paid from the Capital Improvement Contract Services account.
So moved.
Second?
Discussion.
Yeah, I have a couple concerns on this one. It showed that on the agreement that they thought it would only take about 75 hours to complete these inspections, and we're giving them not to exceed 150. Is there a reason why we're doubling the amount of time for
Yes,
them to do these roofs? And the other thing, I know the next one is going to be about the parking garage or the parking deck, and I can see like that being more of an engineering issue than a roof. A roof is a roof, in my opinion. I guess maybe I'm not up on, commercial buildings as much as I am, residential, but do we really have to go through all this engineering process for just a roof? Like, I looked at the Board of Elections building when I was over eating fish at Hanko's one day, and I thought, yeah, it needs to be done, but it's like a residential roof. Now, how much architectural study do you need to do on a roof like that?
Which one of those questions would you like me to answer?
All of them. Let's start with the 150 hours versus the 75 hours.
Okay, what we did there was, it's by assignment, so they're not going to exceed. We left ourselves the availability if the board chose to look at more facilities. But right now, we're believing that 75 is going to be adequate. But we didn't want to have to come back and change the contract if we need to do more work. So we've only gotten 3 roofs listed here. There may be the need for more. And we won't exceed the 75, and we'll talk to you about the scope of work. But I don't want to have to redo a contract and rebid it again if we need additional services. The second part of your question actually was a couple questions, but they all refer to the same thing. Do we need some type of outside assistance with identifying the problems with the roof? Yes and no. I agree with you. The Board of Elections is a pretty standard shingle roof, a standard pitch. It's just a big building.
Right.
Do we need anybody to really do too much on that? No.
The Cook's building I could see because it's a big, long, flat roof.
Well, it's a different type of roof, too,
Right.
and it has equipment on the roof.
Right.
But the bid still has to be spec'd. And you got to spec the equipment, you got to spec all the roof penetrations, what you want done with those. Do you want equipment lifted from the roof before the roofing's done? Do you want the equipment put back into place after it's lifted? Are you going to lift it yourself? Does it need to be lifted? And et cetera. Now, on the Board of Elections building, there is equipment up there, but it's not as significant as on this roof here and on the Job and Family Services building. In fact, Job and Family Services building is a very complicated amount of equipment up on the roof, and it's a rubber roof that's it seems to be close to its service life, but we're not completely sure. They need to go up there and test it and look at it. We've been fixing the seams on that roof for quite a while, and it was put on in, I want to say, 1994. So we're looking at 17 years on a rubber roof, and usually the service life is about 15 years on those, but sometimes more depending on the condition. So it's not as simple as just residential roofing.
Right.
Somebody's still got to do all the specs and spec the material, and otherwise we can get 3 quotes and we can have all kinds of different materials and different rubber materials for the roof and so forth. Again, it's not hugely complicated, but we do need the assistance.
A question on it. We did it 17 years ago. Don't we have the last time the roof was done as far as if the equipment needs to be raised? I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have that, and then wouldn't that be our maintenance director who should be able to tell us what the specs are and everything as far as the material that goes on there?
Probably not with the maintenance director. Do we have the spec? I don't believe so. That was a renovation project that was done on an old building at the time, and architecturally there was a lot of changes to the roof at that point. And specifically, they added a lot of equipment, and they also put on all the knee walls. Could the maintenance director spec the roof?
I know facility managers are the ones that normally go through and do it for commercial buildings and that. So
Yeah, unfortunately, in the private sector, they're not required to get sealed bids.
right. That's true.
And
You're very good.
That's where the complication really comes in, and then they're not required to have bonds, and they're not required to have all this other stuff, and they don't have to worry about homeland terrorists and sign off on their firstborn, and a package is thick to be able to bid, a job that by the time they're done with the paperwork, the profit margin is about zip. So there's a lot more complications, and hopefully one day we'll be able to defeat some of those complications so the business people can get about the work of doing business. But I don't like it, and I don't think they like it. But it gets a little bit more than just a facilities manager calling 3 people for a quote. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, great.
Anything further? Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Enter an agreement with Barber and Hoffman, Inc., Cleveland, to perform engineering services for the parking garage project to include and to be paid from the Capital Improvements Contract Services account. 1, basic scope of services for structural and evaluation and repairs, $38,500. 2, allowance of incidental concrete sample extraction testing, $4,000. 3, parking access and revenue control system review, $30,000. 4, sidewalk plan or streetscape renovations and improvements, $16,500. And evaluation, repair, recoding, CMU, block masonry, and wall, $6,000.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Can you elaborate on number 3 and 4? The parking access and revenue control, and then the sidewalk planner, streetscape renovation?
Absolutely. For a number of years, off and on, we've tried to figure some solutions to providing an automated system in the parking garage. It's been a bit stymieing to us because of the design of the garage itself. These folks we bid alternates underneath this, and I shouldn't say bid, let me back the word up. We had an RFQ, and we put alternates in the RFQ for various levels of work should the board want to do that. You don't have to take all of these. The 3, 4, and 5 are options that you can choose to put into and continue with on the scope of work or delete. But they could help us look at automated systems in the garage and the sidewalk and the planters. If you haven't noticed, the sidewalks on the southern end of the building and the garage there, they're in pretty horrendous shape. It's our responsibility in accordance with the ordinances of the city of Elyria to take care of all the concrete. A few years ago, we did a lot of concrete work in-house. We did a lot up front in the front of the building, but we never made it down to the southern end down there, and it's in pretty bad condition. That would all need to be spec'd out and identified for replacement. And the brick is the planters that are up against and abut the parking garage. About 10 years ago, maybe a little less, we took out those huge planters that used to be where the small planters are now, the trees. We used to have elevated planters there, which were made from the same block as the building, and they deteriorated, and we removed those, and we put the planters down to ground level, and then we installed street lighting that hadn't worked in a number of years. But we did not do the block and the masonry up against the parking deck, and now that's deteriorating to a point where the bricks are falling out of it, and it may well be that the recommendation is to take those planters out, clean that area, and just go back up against the parking deck without any planters back there. I just don't know. But they're 37 years old, and they have not had any maintenance on them. So we need to take a look at that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But while we were doing the RFQ and putting out, we decided to put alternatives for the board to consider. It's your choice.
Seems like an awful lot of money just to engineer it with not even having any work done.
Anything further?
Well, yeah, I do. Do we have to go through with all of these options, or can we delete some of the options from the?
The basis scope, number 1, and the allowance for concrete sampling, et cetera. Those two we should have.
Okay.
3, 4, and 5 are optional that you can have work done to prepare to, if you want to go forward, to repair those items. We'll tell you without 3, 4, and 5, we'll probably reach a stall point on those items, and they'll just remain the way they are. But clearly, we have to move forward on the garage.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's in bad shape. Masonry walls, we have a major concern with.
I don't think there's a major concern, Commissioner. They're not really structural, back up against the garage there. They're just in considerably poor condition. But I don't see them currently as a big safety type hazard.
Okay, and the concrete, number 4.
The concrete,
I mean, you
again,
talked this over, but I mean prioritizing.
well, the concrete work, you can see that we have a lot of holes in the concrete. We have a lot of divots, chunks missing. I can only tell you that if somebody's injured on the sidewalk, it's our responsibility and our liability to maintain the condition of the
We
sidewalk.
need that part done. Can we just go ahead with it in-house without having it evaluated?
Yes, that we can do, but I wouldn't recommend doing any significant concrete work there without doing the block masonry work. If it's going to come down,
Okay.
you don't want to piecemeal the concrete out there, because then you end up with expansion joints everywhere, and it just really doesn't work out
Okay,
well.
I'm asking the questions as we go through.
Right, oh no, I appreciate the questions. If we were gonna make a recommendation to move forward with reconcreting that area, I believe that we should probably rip out those planters, or at least have them redone in conjunction with any sidewalk repair or replacement that's accomplished on the southern end of the building and the parking deck.
Okay, now number 3, parking access revenue controls. We've talked about that for 4 or 5 or 6 years. 30 grand is just for this garage. That's not looking at all of the parking areas and how we're doing just this garage.
Would not believe how expensive this equipment is.
I'll X that 30K if you'd like.
I would
I'll
love
give it a
that,
second.
yeah.
Well, I mean, the one thing I'll bring up, the 30,000 is gonna bring in 96,000 a year.
Only based on the rates we might approve or not approve.
If we go with a $20 fee per month.
With these costs, are these also going to be bonded out with the construction or reconstruction of the parking garage? Or do we have to pay all this up front? And do we have money in an account set aside to pay these?
Yes,
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 and-
and yes. Actually, number one would be, it's the pleasure of the board. Can we fold back in all of these costs if we do a capital improvements bond? The answer
We
is
could
yes.
advance the money and then get it back with a bond?
We can recover that money from the bond. We'll track that separately, so we have the right accounting for that. With regard to capital improvements, this is just one of them. That's why we're looking at the roof, and we're also looking at the garage, and then maybe a few other things at this point that the board may want to decide to do, and we should we'll have more discussions going forward on that. I don't anticipate work this year. By the time we let the contracts get everything done, we'll be deep in the summer. There may be some potential on a roof here or there, maybe the Board of Elections and so forth, but as far as parking deck actual work, I don't anticipate any this year. I think we'll be getting too far into the summer, and by the time they ramp and they come out, we'll be hitting cold weather pretty quick. And the last thing I want to see is the scaffolding all over the parking deck again and doing the
Shoveling
maze
snow?
through the parking deck with the scaffolding and rigging up. Not to mention that each time we did it the last undertaking, I needed to find 150 to different parking spots to put people in because we lost whole sections of the garage. We used to have a lot more parking lots that we had under lease, and we've released those leases. And right now, the only saving grace may be that at the transportation center, we put in about 100 parking spots, and that lot will be done here shortly. If you haven't seen the progress, the sign's up and it's lit and it's coming along really nice. But that still doesn't give us A, enough, and B, if we rent out the community center there, we got to give parking to the people we're renting it out to, so that complicates the use of that center too. So there's some additional strategies that need to be developed, and I don't see that happening this year. But I do see the engineering and all the bid specs and that being done, and then going to bid later in the year for work when the first thaw comes in late March of next year.
So we're looking at this project probably the end of 2012 on all projects completed, and then basically going to bond to pay for them?
Could be. You can stay in construction notes for a while. The rates are a little bit more attractive in construction notes, but clearly the more you roll them, you just try to time and sense the market and get in when you think the rates are going to be at our best advantage. But construction notes are less costly right now.
I would prefer just to stick with 1 and 2 and disregard 3, 4, and 5 myself.
I'm going to go back to number 3. I mean, what we're looking at here is we're looking at less than $1 a day for the people to park in a covered garage on there to help pay for the renovations. The return on investment is 4 months. I mean, to take out that revenue control system, I mean,
That's
gonna
not
generate-
purchasing the revenue control,
That's correct.
Yeah, that's just
Right.
engineering.
that's just
That's
engineering for it, it's
engineering. I
not actually
understand that.
purchasing it.
Well, there's going to be
I didn't
costs on
realize
it.
it was going to be that much going in. When we talked, we were going to look at to do it. I was thinking it was, $2,000.
No.
That was the cost of actually putting
No,
it
no,
in
no,
and
no.
engineering, I
Right,
could see, but it's
We have
not.
to take a look at as far as, towing, things of that, how we're going to maintain the lot. it does open up the lot for the citizens of the county as well coming in here. So, we're looking at a minimum, I think, $96,000 a year. You're looking at 30,000. What's the machine go for? About remember 15, 20
Oh, no.
more for the.
I anticipate automating the garage to probably run about 100,000 plus. But again, that's, equipment that's going to last 10, 15 years.
So when you say
spread out-
automated, I know we were talking before, like what they have, even in Cleveland, where it's a unattended. Basically, you have sensors in there.
Mhm, that's what I meant, automated, some kind of gate, some kind of.
Oh, so you're, do we really need the gate on there?
Oh,
We-
okay.
We looked at having a person that would come in, park, and if the vehicle was able to be towed,
Right,
that type of thing.
that would work on our flat lots, where we put the
Mhm.
embedded sensor technology actually into the pavement. I don't believe that option will be available in the parking deck, given, A, that it's concrete, so putting the sensors in would require a lot more challenges than putting it into blacktop.
So you can't tow out of the garage.
And yet, right, we can't tow out of the garage,
Right.
and we can't ticket and fine in the garage. We even, for a while there, we had some stickers we put on the window would annoy people a few years back, and that didn't work out too well either. They just kind of scraped them off and got mad at us, but didn't stop the behavior. And then we had these mysterious dents and key marks in
Your car?
people's vehicles. So
Not
we
mine.
discontinued that process pretty quick. But I think that for the way the garage is set up, we would be much better with some kind of automated, access or an egress automation that you can't get out until you either pay or put a code in. We're trying to figure out which one will work best in that garage.
And currently with our budget situation where we're going, and if we're gonna be able to bond out all the work, we can save, the 30 grand at least there. Again, you said the concrete, because the city of Elyria would cite us, we don't have that under control, correct?
Well, I'm not going to say they're going to cite us. All I said was that under their ordinance, we're responsible.
We're liable for if somebody trips and falls on our sidewalk. Say yes, Jerry, just don't shake your head,
That's
yes.
correct.
So, again, let me go back to the parking deck, because I don't want to be confusing. We have talked about lots of different technologies that are available. The one we did talk about, embedded sensor, was for across the street, in the lot across the street. So we'd have to worry about gates and arms and so forth, and we could use the sensor. And we talked about that for other flat lots, too. I'm just not sure that that'll work for the parking deck. It would be a great system for the flat lots, anywhere that we were going to have flat lots. And it would also stop us from having to buy arms on Broad Street, because we can't put them up as fast as they break them over there on the machine over there. So that would be something to look at. And plus, the good part about that, if they're out in the flat lots, we can use a lot of solar energy to power up the devices, which will make it easier to install, because then we don't have to worry about conduit and infrastructure, electrical lines, and so forth. But the parking deck is a really poor design. Other than having an attendant stand there and collect tickets or
Right.
money, just a very, very poor design for getting in and out of. And our biggest fear is the cycle rate on anything that's for folks coming into the garage. We were challenged with that on the Justice Center. We had about 140 spaces back then. We ended up having to put an arm at each end of the alley because when we timed everything to get everybody through, the best cycle rate we could get was about 25 seconds between somebody coming up, the arm going up and down and through, etc. And if you start counting that, it doesn't sound like a lot until you figure out how many employees are coming around the same time. And for a while there, with one arm, we didn't think we can get all the employees into work on a timely basis. Here, we probably have about, I want to say about 300, 325, because we have all those fleet vehicles from Children's Service. So we have to figure out how to get, between around 300, 325 people into the garage within about a 30-minute window. That's about usually when they all come to work. And making that work so we're not backed up all the way down 3rd Street.
I know I've seen different technologies on it, just looking at it from different travels and that. And I'm pretty sure you can do it with concrete. There's a couple of different companies. Would you mind tabling this for a week? I don't think it's going to
Oh,
matter.
I don't think it's gonna matter.
And then
either.
I can contact the company and have them come out.
Contact what company?
I can contact the company and talk about the technology.
Oh.
There's
Well,
gonna
if
be
we're not
no
gonna
cost
be able
to
to
the
do anything
county.
this year anyways, I guess we could wait a week.
Actually, you can wait until we do the parking deck repairs, because we really can't do if we're gonna do anything with automating the garage, we've gotta complete the repair work in the garage.
Right.
So we have
No, but I
plenty
thought
of-
we were gonna bond this all together.
You could. And if we're in construction notes, we could add levels of work later on.
Okay.
So, clearly the primary objective of this was to start getting the engineering done to begin repair work on the garage again that we've deferred for the last few years. As far as what we use in the garage, we have plenty of time on that.
Okay,
I'll withdraw my motion.
okay. I'll withdraw my second.
So we'll place this on hold?
Yep.
Okay. Do we want to do the presentation now?
Sure.
Wait, are you placing the engineering on hold?
Placing the whole thing?
The whole thing on hold for a week.
I don't think
No,
that's,
no.
I don't think that's
Just-
what was asked for.
No.
Oh, just number 3?
Well, you just withdrew your whole motion.
Well,
So let's
no,
read
I
this
mean,
out.
I was asking if we could just
Hold number 3?
hold, actually, item 12, number 12.
Oh, the complete
Right,
item?
The complete item, yeah.
Yeah. and
No,
then-
no problem?
No, I don't see any problem with
Okay.
it.
Well, we can go back because the number on 4 and 5, I think what Ted was getting to, we could actually just say that we want to get the work done without having a study done, have it done internal, correct?
Yeah, I think we can handle some of that, yeah. Sure.
I don't mean
Well,
to
that was
speak
my
for you.
talk, no, that's what I was asking, could we do that internally versus having to bid it out and/or have the evaluation done?
Well, I'll tell you, two things, I hate to answer questions yes and no.
Right, I know.
Right.
4 and 5, I'd have to specifically look at the planners and the size of that and see what we require in the city of Elyria to get a permit to do the work. Sometimes they require that, architectural engineering stamp, and sometimes they don't, if it's depending on the scope of the job. So would we be required to do this? I don't really have a good answer on that. If we took out pieces of concrete and replaced them, obviously we can do that. But when we start doing a whole renovation, we may have to pull permits that require us to elevate the engineering and architectural work. So I have to get answers for those. The number 1, though, number 1 and 2 doesn't affect 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, so would you recommend to go ahead with 1 and 2, hold 3, 4, and 5 for further discussion and/or information?
Well, that'll get us moving.
Yeah, I think we should at
All
least
right,
get
I'll make the
started.
motion to approve 1 and 2 for expenditures, which is $42,500. Basic scope of services for structural evaluation repairs and allowance of incidental concrete sample extraction and testing.
And I'll second that.
Anything further? Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Now we
Wanna go,
want
Dora?
Presentation.
presentation.
Good morning, Commissioner Blair.
Former Commissioner Blair.
You're always a commissioner to us, Betty.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you for allowing our West Shore Corridor team to make this presentation today. In the early 1990s, Calvin Waite, an Oberlin councilman, was my alternate to NOACA. He also chaired the Commuter Rail Advisory Committee. It was from this committee that NOACA's Neo-Rail study emanated. That study identified the corridor that we are interested in as one of the most feasible in that Neo-Rail study. Fast forward to 2008, and Congresswoman Betty Sutton also saw the value in this corridor. She obtained an earmark for the commissioners and the Lorain County Community Alliance to perform an alternatives analysis, which is a Federal Transit Administration requirement in order to obtain additional funding. While the earmark was obtained in 2008, it took until 2010 to assemble the necessary match monies. Along the way, we acquired many valuable partners who have worked with us toward the ultimate success of this project. Some include the commissioners of Cuyahoga, Erie, and Lorain, who each adopted a memorandum of understanding for Phase 2 of the West Shore Corridor Transportation Project in order to complete Phase 1 of the alternatives analysis, continue collaboration efforts, recommend land use planning, zoning, and economic investment strategies, expand public involvement and participation, and provide necessary local match funding. Subsequent to a request from the Greater Cleveland RTA, our team has met and discussed collaboratively working together. The consensus was that we should continue to discuss such possibilities. The team has also met with Kalahari's Chief Operating Officer, who put forth a plea for improved transit access to new jobs being created in 2012. At the annual Transportation Day hosted by the Alliance and held at the newly remodeled Transportation Center in Elyria, thank you, Commissioners, new State Representative Dan Ramos offered his verbal expression of support. This past spring, I was privileged to travel on South Florida's Tri-Rail, which coincidentally is a commuter rail service covering 3 counties. We boarded the rail at the Fort Lauderdale Airport and traveled to Miami and back. The rail has a beginning at Palm Beach and was originally constructed to lessen traffic during road construction. It proved so popular that it was kept and enhanced. And finally, I am pleased to report that recently there was a cook-off fundraiser held at Lorain County Community College. In an effort to make Westshore better known, the team entered the competition. While we did not win any top prizes, no one was poisoned by my fabulous party time meatballs. We have some friends in the audience this morning, and I would like to acknowledge them if the board does not mind. First of all, Greg Holcomb from Congresswoman Betty Sutton's office is here. Greg, thank you so much. Second, Catherine Karp is a member of the Elyria School Board who is going to work on the Lorain County Coalition. She's also the president of the Joint Vocational School Board. Stand up, Catherine, please. Dr. Eddie Herndendorf, Sheffield Historical Society. Patrick Petrigan, our friend from the Northern Ohio Rail Coalition, who had money, and we asked him to dance. Thank you, Patrick. Rick Novak from the Lorain Port Authority. And I think that completes the people that I am supposed to introduce. And then it is now my pleasure and privilege to turn the microphone over to Richard Enty, whom you have appointed as project coordinator for the Westshore. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to thank the board for this chance to update you on this project. And again, we're a team, so you're going to hear from a few other folks. The next such policy board briefing will be at this month's NOACA Transportation Advisory Committee. This project seeks to solve a problem that hinders our counties and regions' economic competitiveness, i.e. the inability to travel longer distances between Westshore counties and municipalities by public transit. This is a major quality of life issue being addressed not only here in Northeast Ohio, but across the United States as well. As strongly urged by the Federal Transit Administration, it's important to stress that efforts to improve longer distance travel must be supported by improving local travel by public transit here within Lorain County. That's the goal of the LCT Go Forward initiative, which this board authorized late last year to be funded solely by grant funds. In cooperation with the Lorain County Transportation Coalition, the Go Forward initiative will craft a vision for public transit based on public input via small group meetings with key stakeholders and a county-wide survey. 3 basic potential future service elements will be tested with the public later this year, provided that funds are available to do so. The first is improved fixed route services that would better link far reaches of the county and also improve access between residential areas and major employers, medical centers, and secondary and post-secondary schools. Second is a county-wide dial-a-ride or demand response service, not necessarily restricted to boundary areas, but serving both urban and rural areas throughout the county. This service would potentially utilize subsidized taxis as well as small buses and could replicate a very popular service like what Cuyahoga County has in its Senior Transportation Connection service. And that service is funded by a consortium of social service agencies as well as the transit system. Third would be express buses linking Lorain County with major job areas and tourist attractions in the Cleveland and Sandusky areas and points in between. If the public believes this is useful, future services might include express buses emanating from nodes located in Lorain County's southern, central, and northern areas that would connect to neighboring county nodes as well. And of course, the Westshore Commuter Rail project would be part of that vision as well. But we are here to update you on the Westshore Corridor project Phase 1 alternatives analysis, the initial step in the FTA's project development process that's been underway since last August. Subsequent steps in that process are preliminary engineering, environmental analysis, final design, and construction. The next speakers will be Lorain County Community Alliance Administrative Coordinator Virginia Haynes and Dr. David Hintz, who co-chair the Westshore Studies Combined Technical Committee and Rail Task Force, the entity that the board authorized to oversee the consultant work and which will return to this board with a recommendation at the study's conclusion regarding a locally preferred alternative. And that's the package of improvements that the data and analysis shows will best solve the transportation problem at hand. Their remarks will be followed by Tim Rosenberger of Parsons Brinckerhoff, who will summarize the technical results thus far. PB is supported by a number of subcontractors, including MAC Development Associates, represented here by Jeanette Corlett, who has been leading discussions with the Westshore communities on potential development of transit-supportive station area land use plans. Time permitting, the board will hopefully permit one or two others to make very brief remarks. Mr. Stephen Bonina, representing Swiss railcar builder Stadler US, who flew in this morning from the East Coast to visit the project area, and Mr. Hans Kessler, the honorary Swiss consul, who was invited to attend today by Mr. DeLaporte, the honorary Dutch consul, who's also a member of the Commuter Rail Task Force. I believe that the board is aware that the new LCT buses slated to soon enter service were manufactured here in Lorain County at the Ford plant, providing jobs for county residents. If the vision to restore LCT and later develop commuter rail are realized, far more county residents can be employed building more buses and conducting final assembly on rail cars. They would also help build, maintain, and operate transit facilities and vehicles, including rail stations, track, and signals. And I should say it's fortuitous that Stadler is represented today. As you may know, U.S. Railcar is a company that's based here in Ohio that manufactures rail cars, and it would be kind of nice to have the McDonald's and Burger King competition between the two of them if Stadler is interested in locating a facility here in this state. I'll conclude with a finding by Build Up Greater Cleveland, the civic group devoted to winning political support in Washington for transportation infrastructure funding. It found that for each dollar invested in restoring or rebuilding transportation infrastructure, over $1.50 of economic benefit are generated in terms of jobs for the region. So in addition to improving mobility for county residents and visitors, dollars invested in restoring LCT and pursuing a Westshore Rail project can help create new jobs and help boost the county's economy. Thank you. Virginia.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For the sake of brevity, I've prepared the words, okay? FTA requires a very detailed technical process that has participation by all key stakeholders and the general public. This study's joint technical committee includes 2 ODOT districts, 3 and 12, 3 transit authorities, Sandusky Transit, LCT, and Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, 2 metropolitan planning organizations, Erie Regional Planning Commission and NOACA, Erie County Economic Development Corporation, Lorain Port Authority, and private citizens representing the business community. I should point out that although both Richard Enty and PB periodically communicate with FTA, Pam Novak of LCT is the main contact of record with the FTA Region 5, and that's per FTA's requirement. The committee has met 8 times, starting with the August 26, 2010 kickoff meeting, and has participated in the initial round of public meetings last fall, and provided review and comment on numerous consultant presentations and documents which have been shared electronically with the board. The major reports now being reviewed by FTA are the purpose and need, existing conditions, initial alternative screening, and detailed alternatives description reports. You should also know that The LCCA has applied for additional study funds through a joint FTA HUD Tiger II program, and that resulted in no Ohio grant awards. However, the George Gunn Foundation has awarded several thousand to support LCCA's continued involvement in the project during Phase 2. The technical committee will return to the board following the next round of public meetings in July with a recommendation to the board on completing the phase of the study. In July, citizen input will be sought in 3 study area counties on what you will see shortly from Mr. Rosenberger of PB. Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Dr. Hintz. I am a local podiatrist, and I'm very interested in transportation issues throughout the area. I'm co-chair of the technical committee, and I'm on the Speakers Bureau, and this is the part that we have tried to develop in order to maintain transparency and develop interest among the public, and to also get an idea of where the public's understanding levels and interests were. So this was started last fall, creating public meetings in order for input from the public to be had. The following groups were presentations that have been recently made. The United Auto Workers CAP Council invited us. Lorain Senior Men's Fellowship invited us to present. Lorain County Community Alliance Transportation Day, we presented there as well. St. Joseph Parish Amherst Seniors, Elyria and Lorain Rotary, and Elyria Kiwanis. I think that by that group you can recognize that there is a very broad-based population that was represented throughout all of those. These meetings lasted about 20 to 30 minutes and then involved about 10 to 15 to 20 minutes worth of questions and answers. People were really very interested in the project. The biggest problem that I see was that they didn't realize that it hadn't started. And several people made the comment, how come we're not doing this already? They don't understand the process of alternative analysis and process of approval that the federal government requires. We handled the questions. There was some concern about the cost of the projects. However, people recognize that the economic situation that we have right now will have an effect on this. Also, the price of the fuel will have a positive impact on this. So they fully understand the needs for this and the connectivity issue of connecting people with jobs and developing economic growth along the corridor. And we are going to begin our next set of scheduled meetings in July 11th through Erie County, Lorain County, and Cuyahoga County. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all the other speakers. I can't imagine what I could add to that, so I'll just take questions now. Just kidding. We have a presentation to show you some of the technical analysis that's been done over the last 9 or 10 months on this and some of the conclusions that we've reached. And we'll start out with the background of the project, talk about the Westshore Corridor Transportation Project. As several people mentioned, this is an alternatives analysis under the Federal Transit Administration's New Starts process, and I will talk a little bit about that. The recommended progression of service as we build up to a commuter rail alternative, some of the governance and funding options, and then where we go from here, where we go from the end of this alternatives analysis project. As Commissioner Blair mentioned, this is an idea that's been kicking around for a long time, about nearly 20 years now, and actually Richard and I worked at Greater Cleveland RTA back in the early 90s, and we're talking about this at that time. But where I actually come into the picture and where my company, Parsons Brinckerhoff, comes in was with the NEO-Rail study, which was completed for NOACA back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and in that study, we started out with more than 40 potential commuter rail corridors in this region, narrowed that down to 10 and eventually to 7 that seemed to make sense for future development. This corridor between Lorain and downtown Cleveland was rated #1 as far as the most potentially feasible and viable of these 7 commuter rail corridors. That study ended around 2002 and really progress virtually stopped at that point. Funding situations and other issues prevented us from moving forward, but there were a group of people here in Lorain County who kept this idea alive in this corridor. And I have to say that I do these studies all over the country, although I am based here in the Cleveland area, and I have to say that very few projects that I've worked on have such broad grassroots support. And some of the folks that you've seen today, which is just the tip of the iceberg of the many people who have been involved in keeping this going. Funds were earmarked to move forward on an alternatives analysis, which is the next step that needed to be done to move commuter rail forward by Betty Sutton in 2008. And we were able to get started last year after some bumps in the road working on this study. This, what we're showing now is our, the black outline is the area that we studied, and we're basically studying alternatives to and including commuter rail in this corridor. Now, we've talked a lot about alternatives analysis and a lot of basically federal mumbo jumbo, but basically the process that we're going through is we need to identify what the problem is that we're trying to solve with the transportation improvement, and then various alternative methods for solving that problem, and finally coming down to a preferred alternative, basically the combination of transportation improvements that we think would best and most cost effectively solve that problem. And our purpose on this study is to identify cost-effective transportation investment that will improve inter-county mobility. We are looking at basically a 3-county corridor here, Erie County, Lorain, and Cuyahoga County. And we did identify a number of problems, and these problems have been around with us for a very long time, and certainly were some of the problems that were identified in the NeoRail study. There is at the base a lack of transit connections into Cleveland and into Cuyahoga County from Lorain and Erie counties, and this is a particular problem in Lorain County. If you take a look at the map, the counties surrounding Cleveland and surrounding Cuyahoga County, Lake, Portage, Summit, and Brunswick and Medina County all operate transit services into downtown Cleveland for commuters. Cuyahoga County, which is more sparsely populated, and Lorain County are the only 2 counties in the region that currently do not operate any kind of commuter bus connections into downtown Cleveland. And this is a particular issue in this corridor. Our Greater Cleveland RTA has 2 park and ride lots located near to the Lorain County border in Cuyahoga County. They're actually both on Columbia Road, one in North Olmsted and one in Westlake. And about half of the people who use those lots, and we're talking about lots that carry 200 to 300 cars per day with bus connections into downtown Cleveland, about half of the people using those lots have Cuyahoga County or Lorain County license plates. These are Lorain County residents who are traveling into Cuyahoga County to use Greater Cleveland RTA service. And clearly, if a park and ride connection, if commuter connections were located closer to the source in Lorain County, there would be even greater use of that for people who are commuting into downtown Cleveland and areas nearby. There is also a lack of transit connection to Lorain and Erie County. One of the speakers mentioned talking to Kalahari, I think Commissioner Blair, and there are a number of employers in Erie County who are very interested in gaining access to the job market of people in Cuyahoga and especially Lorain County. Kalahari particularly is interested in gaining access to people to work in their hotel and in their other facilities out there in Erie County, and know that there is an untapped market in Erie County for folks to work at those jobs. The lack of transportation access affects employment opportunities as well as access to health care, shopping, education, and tourist destinations throughout the corridor, both in Erie and Cuyahoga County as well as in Lorain. Land use patterns in suburban growth areas right now are not supportive of public transit. They are generally low-density suburban development, and that is something that would be a challenge for putting in commuter rail and something that would need to be addressed. We considered many alternatives, taking into account different alignments, operating on I-90, operating on Lake Road, operating on the rail line, and many combinations transportation improvements. But what we came down to and really analyzed in detail were 3 commuter rail options operating from Sandusky to the lakefront in downtown Cleveland, from Sandusky to Tower City, and from Sandusky to West Boulevard, which is a rapid station on the Greater Cleveland RTA rapid system, and then commuter bus services operating from Sandusky to a connection at the Westlake Park and Ride on Columbia Road, and commuter bus service from Sandusky to Public Square. These are just a map showing some of the alternatives. You see we have a number of alternatives operating on the nickel plate line and on the NS main line west of Vermilion. And then we have a number of alternatives, the bus alternatives that are operating on Route 2 and I-90. And what we came up with after we looked at all those alternatives, we did some ridership testing and a number of other things, capital cost estimates, operating cost estimates, look at the economic development opportunities. And what we think makes the most sense coming out of this study is basically a step approach where we have 3 or 4 steps to a complete commuter rail system. And where this really starts is with commuter bus service. Commuter bus service is the most cost-effective way to address the problem that's in front of us now. Commuter bus service would clearly carry, based on our estimates, 300 to 500 folks a day into downtown Cleveland and the surrounding area from Lorain County, and would be an important first step in demonstrating the market for commuter rail service while providing a very cost-effective, relatively inexpensive. Both LCT and Greater Cleveland RTA have buses on hand. It would just really be a matter of promoting the service, paying the drivers, and basically getting the show on the road with getting that service going, get some park and ride lots set up on a temporary basis. That could be done very quickly and very easily, and start to demonstrate the 3 counties' commitment to further transit service in this corridor and making those connections that need to be made, as well as our commitment to moving forward on commuter rail service. In the 6 to 10 year period, a little further out, expanding that commuter bus service in Lorain County to serve more locations and provide more frequent service so that we would carry more people, and then establish commuter bus service from Erie County, where there are apparently several hundred people a day who are traveling into Cuyahoga County for work, and we could provide some commuter bus service to grow that market, as well as markets for commuting into Lorain County from Erie County. We don't want to forget, though, about the commuter rail service, because in the long run, as that bus service builds in popularity, grows in popularity, and should the price of fuel continue to rise, the market is going to become such that it would be actually more efficient to use rail, because a bus obviously can only carry 50 or 60 people at a time. A rail car can carry several hundred people at a time, and therefore, when you have greater demand, rail does at some point become more efficient than running buses. We want to keep working on that within the 6 to 10 year period, working through the federal environmental process to get a full funding grant agreement to provide the capital costs for commuter rail. Then in the years 10 through 15 would be actually the construction and startup of commuter rail service from Lorain, Black River Landing into downtown Cleveland, ultimately in further out years extending that service into Erie County as demand and availability of funds permit. So that just basically takes us in detail through what I just said on the other schedule, on the other slide. And this schedule shows a tentative schedule, assuming that we would start up next year with the commuter bus service, and the many, many steps that would be taken in order to move us into eventual implementation of commuter rail service in the corridor. So who would run the service? And that's a question that we don't need to answer now, but we do need to explore it. And there are really a lot of options out there. Many other cities and states operate this type of service, and there are many models out there. Greater Cleveland RTA could potentially take this on. Lorain County Transit, perhaps a partnership between Greater Cleveland RTA, Lorain County Transit, and Erie County could put that together. A new inter-county transportation agency could be formed to provide inter-county service between these counties or expanded to other counties. Or a private entity could potentially operate it. There would be an operating subsidy involved, but it may be that a private entity would be the most fastest and most cost-effective way of doing that. And there are We have had some conversations with NS. We have not got to that point yet with Norfolk Southern, who is the owner of the rail lines that we're talking about operating here. But there is some possibility that they or another operator could be interested in operating the service with a subsidy. But the counties must reach a consensus on who will operate the service and how that is going to be governed in order for us to move forward. Another thing that stands in our way with getting federal funding for this is land use in the corridor. The land use and economic development, it makes up 40% of the evaluation criteria that FTA uses to determine whether to fund projects like this. The land use in much of the corridor in Lorain, in Sandusky, and in parts of Cuyahoga County, very, very strong. We have dense development and a lot of walkability. Many of the areas in eastern Lorain County where we are, where we would be serving, and the growing areas of this county and of Cuyahoga County actually, are not. They are suburban in character, and we would need to show some ability to change that future land use, showing zoning or land use planning changes that would concentrate development around the stations so that people would be able to walk or make a short car trip to a park and ride lot in order to use those park and ride resources. The federal government wants to make sure that the transportation investments that it makes are positively affecting land use development and are creating land use development that will support the transportation investments over the long term. This is just an example that we put together, so don't get excited that there's a new development planned here, and of course there may be developments that we don't know about planned here, but this is at Elyria and this is one of our station locations that we've identified where the red dot is. And we took a look at some of the potential development that could happen here. That's showing the station location relative to the new interchange that's to be built. And Skip Smallridge, our development expert on our team, put together a scheme whereby we would develop 12.65 units per acre, which is about double the normal development that's gone on in this part of the corridor, where we could locate within about a quarter mile of the station 584 townhouse units and 383 units over retail for a total of 967 units, 130,000 square feet of retail and 120,000 square feet of office space, all within this small area. So it would be relatively dense, something like Crocker Park, perhaps, that would be possible here and would very well support a station at this location. And this is something that the federal government would see very favorably. Then this is a phase 2 that would add to that. In terms of estimated cost, when you're talking about phase 1 and you're talking about buses, this could be done very simply and relatively cheaply. We have down here $11.2 million in capital cost, and that's primarily buying and constructing park and ride lots. That could be done on a temporary basis for much less. The annual O&M cost about $8.3 million to operate that service. As you go through the phases where we are talking about building commuter rail, obviously the costs go up very significantly. $160 million to build the rail from Lorain to downtown Cleveland, and phase 4, $222 million to go out to Sandusky. And there are very technical reasons why those costs are necessary, but basically there are some track connections that need to be made, and there are some areas where additional track would have to be laid in order to allow that, as well as building park and ride lots, building stations, buying rolling stock, and things like that. There are ways to cut that cost. For example, if we were able to find, we're assuming about a cost of $10 million apiece for the trains. There have been instances in the past when commuter rail lines were able to start up using used equipment that they were able to get for far less. So there may be ways that we can get that number down as we go through the phases of the process. But at this point, we want to be prudent and cautious and show what we think the outside chance of cost is going to be for these improvements. Well, possible funding options. This is a project that would be phased in over a long period of time, and it is a multi-county project. So you have a lot of counties and a lot of partners potentially to share in that cost. Passenger fares would pay a significant portion of that cost. We're not talking about $1 for bus fare to use this service. You're talking about a service that would probably cost anywhere from $5 to $10 a trip, depending on where you're coming from. There is the opportunity for private investment and joint development along the corridor. There is, and you know, showing the development possibilities there, there is an opportunity there for tax increment financing and value capture that we could use. We are working on making some preliminary estimates of that right now, and that's going to appear in our next series of public meetings and in our final report. There are a number of taxes, and all of these taxes would have to be supported and approved by the voters. Sales tax is the most common form of dedicated tax for transit in Ohio. Property taxes are also used. Tourism taxes. You have a corridor here where downtown Cleveland and Sandusky particularly have strong tourism markets, and there are areas here in Lorain County as well. And then finally, revenue bonds and value capture I already talked about. LCT and Greater Cleveland RTA would be able to reallocate some service that they operate now as a result of putting this service in, so there would be some cost savings that would be possible from both of those agencies that could be put toward operating this service. So the next steps, we're completing the technical analysis. We're actually writing the final report now. We just have a couple of small pieces of information to wrap up. We are holding public meetings. They were scheduled for the middle of July. It looks like that based on because we are trying to enter the federal environmental process, we're going to have to wait for them to approve the project to go forward into that environmental process before we can have our public meetings. So we think that those are liable to be rescheduled for August or September now, but they will be happening soon. We'll be wrapping up this phase of the study. And then additional analysis is needed to really complete the alternatives analysis and move forward into the environmental. And one of the big pieces of that is something that's very technical and very boring, but we have to do some work on NOACA's regional travel forecasting model in order to be able to do the ridership estimating that the federal government would require in order to move forward. So we'll be working on that in a subsequent phase. However, we can begin implementation of the first steps, the bus service, at any time that the funding becomes available and pending the financial capacity. And if you want more information, you can contact me at this address or telephone number or email. I'm always happy to help. And of course, we have Rich and the others who also have a lot of information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Or again, if you'd like to hear from some of our guests. In fact, Mr. Kessler just got in from Switzerland yesterday and hurried over here today.
Anyone wishing to address the board? We'll listen to anybody.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Steve Bonina. I'm the president of Stadler US. Stadler is a European-based, Swiss-based railcar manufacturer. We've just expanded our operations into the United States, and we have an eye at building and maintaining a permanent railcar manufacturing plant in the United States. Stadler Rail is a medium-sized company. We run about 1.1 billion euros per year in sales, just selling passenger rail cars. Our product line is basically about cost-effective rail cars. It's Swiss quality, it's very high quality, and we're looking at keeping the life cycle costs low. We are very, very interested in partnering with a community somewhere in the United States and developing a railcar manufacturing plant. Personally, I've been in the railcar manufacturing business since the early 80s. And I've actually worked at a startup facility with Kawasaki Railcar in Yonkers, New York. That was roughly a 10-year experiment that the Japanese started in the United States. The plant is still here today. As a matter of fact, they've expanded into 2 other states, and their business continues to grow. I can't really speak to what the jobs would be for Stadler. That really depends a lot on the type of awards and contracts that come down the line. But I can tell you about in the previous assignments that I worked on, for example, in Kawasaki, They averaged about 350 to 400 manufacturing jobs, and about 10%, 15% on top of that for staff, management, and stock keepers and things of that nature. So that's a very sizable workforce. The benefits to rail transportation, I've seen them in so many different locations, as I'm sure Mr. Rosenberg will attest to. The amount of transit-oriented development that occurs around each of these rail stations, to me, really needs to get the business community excited. Historically, there's always a lot of negative press in the paper about why you're spending all this money for this rail system, until the rail system actually starts. And then the press miraculously turns around, and I've seen this over and over again in every project, where they literally come back and they turn around, you stupid government agency, how come you didn't do this sooner? There's so much benefit that's occurring from here. You see the economic development that happens typically within about a half a mile of the rail stations. You see the businesses expanding and revitalizing their businesses, hiring new staff. There are just so many ancillary benefits associated with a rail system that you're really looking at. And I'd be happy to give you names, contacts, and cities that you can go and see them, one after the other. For example, the country's favorite, Portland, where the business community is actually telling the governmental agencies, hey, this is what we want, and the business community is actually driving everything because they see an economic revitalization, associated with the rail system, and they see economic benefits to the businesses. As a matter of fact, the businesses in Portland actually agreed to tax themselves to help pay and subsidize for their streetcar system. And it's really a remarkable, renaissance that occurs over and over again. And if you haven't actually gone out and see them, I'm sure, your paid staff or anybody in the rail transportation business can easily come up with a list of cities that you really need to go see, because I'm a real believer in, if you hear it, you're probably going to forget it. Who was this guy who came up and talked to us? You'll probably forget what I said, but when you see it and you understand it, then you'll believe it. And you really need to see these rail systems and the economic benefit that it's done for the areas, to really embrace it and then to forge ahead and to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? You're always welcome, Mr. DeLaporte.
Well, thank you very much. I'm talking here as my position as immediate past chairman of the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad. The CVSR is the largest passenger railroad in the state of Ohio. We transport more people than Amtrak does. Our North Akron station is the busiest railroad passenger station in the state. And so we know a few things about transporting people, and I would like to share some of our experiences with you. Right now, we are trying out what we call the green engine. This is an engine which has been developed here in Lorain, in the Ford plant, and they built 2 examples of those, and one we are testing out, and the cost savings are phenomenal. We have right now fuel savings of up to 73%. And really, if we have longer runs, it's up to 80%, and it's developed here in Lorain. So we have kind of an experience here in this county. And what I would like you to do, if you have ever the chance, be our guest, have a ride on the CVSR, and see how a real railroad is doing their passenger service. And it gives you a little bit of an idea. Of course, we are not a commuter line, but people like us to commute, but it is a little bit difficult because we are limited by the park space speed limits, but we could do it. But if you see how a railroad works, and if you haven't had the experience, it is phenomenal, and I think it would be a good educational for a lot of people who haven't been involved in this kind of business. So my offer to you is whatever we can do to help you, we are there, as Commissioner Betty Blair knows. She already visited some cars which need a lot of rebuilding, but could be made available for trial purposes. And whatever we can do, we are there. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnie.
Thank you very much.
Rich?
Okay. Again, I'd like to thank the board for letting us give this briefing. I know it's a lot of information at once, but this is a pretty involved process. Again, we will come back to you. The committee has to review some of the things that you've seen today, and they will actually make the official recommendation to the board as to where we go from here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Cortez, County Administrator.
I think it's been a fairly long morning already. We yield to the County Prosecutor.
Commissioners, I do have several issues of either pending or imminent litigation that I withheld from last week, and I need to take a few minutes in executive session to update you regarding those matters.
Commissioners report.
Oh, this morning, Ted Kalo got to join me for the first time in his first Team Lorain County meeting, which lasted almost right up to this meeting. It was very educational. We had Mr. Walt Myer from Team NEO visit us to give us an update and break down what they're doing at the Northeast Ohio regional level. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, since the inception, there's been 7,321 jobs created in Northeast Ohio. And Cuyahoga, of course, because of their size, has had 3,213 employees benefit from this, but Lorain County came in number 2, and that's with 1,366 jobs. So I think we're doing good things with Team Lorain County Growth Partnership and Team NEO. This past week, I was going to be giving away a recycled bench at our collection center. We thought the 10,000th car was going to come through this past week, but it looks like it's going to be maybe next week. So people who want to start bringing their disposable items to our collection center will be receiving the 10,000th car, will be given a recycled bench. And and it's about our 1-year anniversary too, close to our 1-year anniversary. And then the last thing, yesterday I had, on my way in, went past the records center and noticed a lot of weeds, and I called the maintenance director, and I also called the county administrator to talk about those issues. And I thought for sure, since commissioners complaining that those weeds would be cut down by today, and they're not, and I'm not happy about that. So
Who did you call?
I called you, and I called the maintenance director.
I,
Nothing was done.
I assumed that you had called the appropriate person.
I
so
thought
I
I
didn't
did,
take
but
any action. I thought you were just ruminating with me when you when you called. I wasn't supposed to go out there
I
and
didn't
pull
think
the
you
weeds,
needed to
but I
do
will be out
anything,
there
but you said
right
you
after
were
work
gonna-
today with my hoe.
with
and,
your own weed whacker, I hope.
Anything for you, Commissioner, because my favorite commissioner left, so you're the new one. And
Those where it leaves us at town.
Women rule. Okay, I think that's the end of my report.
Yeah, thank you very much. Team Lorain County was quite an interesting meeting for the first time through. Also attended the Memorial Day parades in Lorain and Elyria. Commissioner Blair actually came along. It was nice to see you out, Commissioner. And it's going to be a busy week going forward, so that's the end of my report. Short one.
I met with the domestic relations judges, and that they're working on some things with the budget. They would like to have a thorough hearing, like a 2-3 hour hearing in July to go over the 2012 budget. One thing that came up is they're looking for 3 vehicles, and we do have a surplus. Don't need an answer now, like you think about it. One, to transport kids back and forth, and they think they could get away with like a Crown Vic, one that we have. Currently, they're using a bus that has a stop sign welded on the bottom of it, so the kids don't fall through. And then they need 2 smaller cars to get back and forth for monitoring home detainees. So just something to think about. If we could take it out of our fleet, that would be great. I asked Mr. Cortez to look into that, throw it on top of his paperwork. So he was busy getting that LEAP application for the audit done. And then last thing, went out to Kipton. If you haven't been out to the village of Kipton, it's got a great Metro Park system out there. Mayor Bob Meinlander allowed me to attend the Memorial Day Parade. It's on the Sunday before Memorial Day, so if you could remember to go out there next week. Great little village, great Metro Park system, and a lot of good things going out in the village of Kipton. And the report.
Board correspondence?
Move the reading be waived.
Second?
Discussion. Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Public comment?
Anyone wishing to address the board this morning?
I think
Wellington
there's
Balloon
one.
Festival?
I'm gonna say it.
My name is Howard Reynolds. I'm retired from the county. I am, I guess, right now co-chair of the Wellington Balloonfest. Balloonfest this year will be this coming Saturday, June 4th. It will start at 12 o'clock noon and run till maybe 10 o'clock. During the day, we will have food, drinks, beverages, I should say, entertainment for the kids, games for the kids, games for the adults. We have 3 bands that are coming, which will be the Sleight of Hand, Tammy Southern Crossroads Band, and Music on a Mission. They're scheduled every 3 hours. The balloon flight will probably be around 6:30, when the balloons will take off sometime after 6:30. Once they take off and take their passengers for a ride, then they will come back, and about dusk they will set up again and do what is called a balloon glow. This is where they'll have a certain special burner on the basket that'll shoot out a large orange flame instead of the hot blue flame they usually use. And this lights up the balloons. And hopefully this year, if we have the speakers in place and everything, we may have them do it to music. So we're hoping for that. This is the 4th year that we're having it. Last year was kind of a disaster. I wouldn't say a disaster, but the weather kind of did us in. And then a couple of days later, while we find out a tornado had gone through Toledo or Wood County. So we felt fortunate in calling it off. Didn't want to, but we did. This year, so far as I can see, it should be in the mid-80s. Sunshine. Hopefully good flying weather. We have crafters and vendors coming out. Like I said, food and pop, adult and kids games. We got a bouncy house with an attached slide. And this year, I'm sure everybody would like to see this or do it. It's a Velcro wall. So you can run up, jump against the wall and hope you stick. It's something new that we're going to try. And then we have the Wellington Fire District Safety House and Sparky the Robot Dog. Southern Lorain County Ambulance District is going to have items down there in the ambulance. WOBL is also going to be on hand for about a 2-hour broadcast starting about noon. We have 18 balloons coming in. Of that, 17 will probably fly. The last one is going to do what they call a tethered ride, where Mr. Kalo went for a full-blown ride a couple of years ago, and that's just taking off and flying for about an hour. Tethered ride is where the balloon is actually still tied to the ground. You go up maybe 75, 80 feet and come back down. So you at least get some semblance of what the balloon does. And what we're charging or asking for is $5 for a carload to park. That could be 2 people in the car, 1 person, 6 people, whatever. And the Walk-ups are $2 per person. So we're kind of encouraging everybody to walk in. It'll be coming in the main gate. It will be in the area of the people that are familiar with the campgrounds, or the fairgrounds. It's where the campers usually are and the reserved parking. And then the balloons will be on the west side of the railroad tracks. So it's going to be a very inexpensive day to come out, enjoy. Bring your cameras, your chairs, blankets. And the one last thing about this that I will mention is all the proceeds go to the Lorain County Office on Aging. The whole thing is put on by volunteers. Virginia has done a great job in getting volunteers this year, and we hope to see you all out there.
It's a great time. When rights are like
Yes.
parasailing, you're up there, it's really cool, so it was really nice. Thanks, Howard.
Yeah, thank you, Howard.
You're welcome.
You know, what I would like to do is maybe get Mr. Cortez on the Velcro, and that, I think we could get some revenue there.
Anything for revenue enhancement.
Dollar an egg.
Howard, you forgot your glasses.
We can get the duct tape going.
Good morning.
Good morning, Elizabeth Rummix, Oberlin. Last year in the summertime in Oberlin, I saw some of these balloons going over. At least I assume that's where they came from. At the time, it was a total mystery. And there really is something incredible about this colorful thing just quietly floating overhead. I have three quickie things. One, if in front of the Records Center is anything like the backyards in Oberlin, it is simply too wet to mow. I finally had my grass cut, and it was so high I had to rake it off.
This wasn't grass, this was weeds, like
Okay.
just around the building and signs and,
Okay.
so it's a weed whacking issue, not a mowing issue.
Secondly, I sometimes come along from the south side of the building, and yes, the sidewalk there does need repair. The planters have some beautiful iris in them right now, but they also have some weeds. And the third thing is that the Juneteenth Festival will be in Oberlin on Saturday, June 17th. We are currently having a kind of citizen input towards long-range planning called Oberlin 2025. And among the things they ask is, what are some of the good things about Oberlin? One of them is certainly Tappan Square, which is where the Juneteenth Festival takes place, with many, many colorful things going on. That will be June 17th, Saturday.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Anybody else wishing to address the board this morning? I'll make a motion to move into executive session as outlined by the county administrator and county prosecutor.
I'll second.
Mr. Kayla?
Aye.
Ms. Kowski?
Aye.
Mr. Williams?
Aye.
This has been a broadcast of the recent Lorain County Commissioners' General Meeting. Unless otherwise announced, meetings are held Wednesday morning at 9:30 at the Administration Building, 226 Middle Avenue, 4th floor, downtown Elyria. These are public meetings, and you are invited to attend. Agendas are posted prior to the meeting at www.loraincounty.us. Click on Departments to see the Commissioners page, then click on View Agenda for a printable copy of the agenda.
How about a little trash talk about Lorain County Solid Waste Collection Center in Elyria? The Collection Center makes it easy for Lorain County residents with ID to get rid of stuff you don't want going into a landfill. Stuff like hazardous waste, acids, household bleach, oven cleaners, antifreeze, paint, herbicides. Take it to the Collection Center. It's a drive-through, so it's easy to get rid of scrap tires, even if they're on the rims. The Collection Center also takes e-scrap like computers and monitors, circuit boards, microwave ovens, smoke detectors, even household TVs up to 27 inches, no console models, fluorescent lights and ballasts, reference materials and books, fire extinguishers, all kinds of stuff. Drive-through, drop-off. Just don't bring curbside recyclables, explosives, medical waste, radioactive materials. For what's accepted and not accepted, visit loraincounty.us/solid waste. The Collection Center near Big Lots at 540 South Abbey Road in Elyria is a service of the Lorain County Solid Waste District, the Department of the Lorain County Commissioners.
Carpooling, a great way to save on fuel, tolls, and parking. Serving 13 counties, secure and safe Ohio rideshare makes it easy to connect with carpool partners safely. You control information shared. Discuss your destinations and needs through our safe site. Carpooling reduces pollution and traffic congestion, while it lowers stress and gives riders time to read, work, sleep, socialize. 1-800-825-RIDE or register online at ohiorideshare.com. Point, click, ride.
In 1787, the Continental Congress organized the lands from the Ohio River to the Mississippi into the Northwest Territories. In 1803, the first of these territories to become a state was Ohio. Ohio was in turn divided into various land grants, including the Connecticut Western Reserve in the northeast corner of the state. The Western Reserve included the area that is today Lorain County. As Ohio gradually increased its counties to the present 88, the land we know as Lorain County went through several changes. Until 1810, the area was split between Cuyahoga and Portage counties. When the area was being organized into Lorain County in 1822, it was created out of land from Huron, Cuyahoga, and Medina counties. At the time of its birth, Lorain County included Olmsted Township, now in Cuyahoga County, Spencer and Homer Townships, now in Medina County, and Troy and Sullivan Townships, now in Ashland County. This map illustrates the county as it appeared at the time of Ohio's centennial, and although some of the townships have been absorbed by incorporation, it also represents the shape of Lorain County today. Let's take a brief historical look at each of Lorain County's 21 townships. In 1807, the Calvin Hoadley and Herman Bronson families of Waterbury, Connecticut, began the settlement of Columbia. After a 3-month trek, the pioneers arrived in their new homeland in time to celebrate Christmas. The Bronsons, including their 7-month-old son, began that winter sheltered by their overturned bobsled wagon converted into a frontier lean-to. The mouth of the Black River also saw the beginning of its first settlement in 1807, when Azariah Beebe established a trading post for Nathan Perry. This area, which 20 years earlier had seen a short-lived Moravian mission, would gradually grow into the village of Charleston in the township called Black River. Years later, this township would be removed from county maps because of the incorporation of the city of Lorain. Charleston adopted the county's name of Lorain when the city was incorporated in 1874. The dramatic growth of the city was spurred on by the expanding fishing and shipbuilding industries. In 1894, when Tom Johnson brought his steel mill to town, Lorain's destiny to be the county's largest city was assured. In 1813, the township of Ridgeville was officially organized. 3 years earlier, members of the Beebe, Terrell, and Root families had established this new settlement they called Rootstown. The change to Ridgeville was decided upon to indicate the sand ridges that passed through the area and provided transportation routes and fertile farmland. The area around the intersection of Butternut Ridge and Roots Road, first called Briggs Corner, was by 1880 known as Fields Corners and was the site of the town's water well. With the growth of the city of North Ridgeville, the township of Ridgeville was incorporated out of existence. In 1810, Silas Wilmot, along with Asa and Ira Morgan, erected a cabin on Butternut Ridge, and the community later called Eaton Township was begun. Wilmot married Chloe Hubbard of Ashtabula, and they were given the cabin, thereby becoming the township's pioneering couple. When Ridgeville Township was organized in 1813, it included Eaton, which was at that time called Holbrook. While the area was still a part of Cuyahoga County, the township of Eaton was separated from Ridgeville. Its first officers were elected in 1823, while the township was in transition to the new Lorain County. Amherst's township's founding can be traced to one Jacob Shoup. After first settling on the Black River, he moved in 1811 to the Beaver Creek. By 1815, he had erected a grist mill and the area's first distillery. Whiskeyville, today the intersection of Routes 58 and 113, earned its nickname as a center for the production of this important pioneer commodity. As the primary community of the township developed at the Old Spring, it came to be known as Amherst Corners. By 1836, the name Amherstville was recorded in the county offices, and in 1873, the town was incorporated as North Amherst. In 1909, the U.S. Postal Service had to choose between the villages of North and South Amherst. They chose the former, which then became the official and present-day Amherst. In 1917, in the northeast corner of the county, the township of Avon became another of Lorain County's 21 townships to vanish due to city incorporation. In 1814, Wilbur Cahoon had arrived from Montgomery County, New York, to become the first to settle in what was then Troy Township of Cuyahoga County. The farming community grew around its power source, the French Creek. Development along the interurban line would incorporate the northern part of the township into the city of Avon Lake in 1911, with the remainder of the township becoming the village of Avon in 1917. It was families such as the Burrell, Day, and Roots who established themselves in the Sheffield area in 1815 and 16. The township of Sheffield would not actually be created until 1824, when the newly elected Lorain County Commissioners made the township one of the first acts of their administration. The land had been primarily in Cuyahoga County prior to the 1822 reorganization. The southwest corner of the township was in Huron County and is today the only place to find a small section still called Sheffield Township. The remainder of the area has been incorporated, like its neighbor Avon, with the north becoming Sheffield Lake and the south the village of Sheffield. In 1816, Colonel Henry Brown of Stockbridge, Massachusetts, purchased a large tract of land known as Number 6, Range 19. Mr. Brown would later name the township after himself by simply adding Helm to his family name. Like the Old Saxon Ham, the suffix meant home. The Deacon Shepherd family were the first settlers when they arrived on July 4, 1817. The village of Brownhelm Mills, located in Benjamin Bacon's Mill Hollow, was one of 3 communities to develop. Bacon's Corners, or the center, was 3 miles east of the hollow, while just west of the hollow was Rugby, where stores, a church, a school, and the post office were located. The first settlers to the Grafton Township area were Jonathan and Grendall Rawson in 1816. 10 years later, the Rawsons were forced to build a grist mill, or forfeit their land under their original agreement with the Western Reserve Land Company. Railroads and quarries were the greatest influence on the growth of the village the locals called Rawsonville. The quarrying industry in particular was responsible for the influx of French-Canadian, Welsh, Irish, Polish, and German immigrants. In 1877, when the village was being incorporated, the name Rawsonville was dropped in favor of the railroad station name of Grafton. Originally a part of Elyria Township, Carlisle was settled in 1816 by John Bacon of Windham County, Vermont. When the new Lorain County was being organized in 1822, Carlisle Township became its own entity. LaPorte developed as the township village with Phineas Johnson as the first postmaster and hotel owner. In 1840, Anson Brayman's Carlisle Nursery became the first of its kind in Lorain County. Quarrying was another important industry of the township, as the sandstone blocks were used for city buildings as far away as Toronto. Founding father Heman Ely owned over 10,000 acres of the land that would be developed into the township of Elyria, and the city, which also bears his family name. In 1817, Artemus Beebe headed a work crew that came to establish a new village at the Y of the Black River branches. Mills were constructed and the main street cleared. Beebe's crew also erected a home for Mr. Ely at Broad and East Bridge Streets, and a home for himself across the street, which became the Beebe Tavern. Both structures avoided demolition until well into the 20th century. In 1822, Mr. Ely spearheaded the movement to create Lorain County. He donated the land for the county courthouse, thus influencing the choice of Elyria as the county seat. Mr. Ely's little village would develop into a city with a varied industrial base as well as the center of government for Lorain County. Simon Durand came to America as an interpreter for Revolutionary War hero French General Lafayette. Durand remained in the new nation and in the winter of 1817 moved from New York State to the 160 acres he had purchased south of Brownhelm. 10 years later, the population of the area was enough to support the formation of a new township. With the southern portion ceded to Brighton and the northern portion annexed from Brownhelm, the township of Henrietta was created in 1827. Although New England families represented the majority of settlers to the area in 1818, one of the pioneers was William Welling of Montgomery County, New York. History is not clear if the community was named in honor of Welling or for the famous English Duke of Wellington, hero of Europe's recent Napoleonic Wars. With the coming of the railroad, Wellington grew into an agricultural marketplace, and in fact was the nation's leader in cheese production from 1870 to 1900. The county fair, now located in Wellington, helps to continue the depiction of small-town America shown in native son Archibald Willard's famous painting, The Spirit of '76. In 1818, Joseph Sage and the family of his son-in-law, John Laborie, journeyed through a severe winter from Connecticut to their new homestead in Huntington Township. More pioneering families came to the area, and by 1822, the population was such that the Medina County Commissioners incorporated the township using the Huntington, Connecticut hometown of many of the settlers as its new name. Lumber, grain, and cheese dominated the local economy. In 1820, cheese production